This is Erin Kenny. It's December 12th, 2023. I'm here in historic Timmons Hall with Christine Peoples, who's the education coordinator here in Silver Springs Park for the Springfield-Greene County Park Board. So thank you, Christine, for being here.
Thank you.
So I wonder if we could start by having you tell me a little bit about your background with the Hollow Community Research Project. I understand that started at a community library.
Well, actually, the concept of meeting and greeting people started at the library, the Midtown Carnegie Branch Library. Just during that time, there was just a lot going on around Black History Month. And so it just caused me to research, rethink, and reimagine spaces that kids could grow in their own identity. And, we've had children that questioned their identity, and moms actually contacted me and came together and said, hey, we have to do something. And the library is my favorite place. Education-wise, finding the books you need to support, what you're doing. So we started having programming there, and it was adding up to that celebratory day that we would celebrate meeting and greeting at the library celebration. I didn't put Black history on the celebration because I wanted the kids to be able to learn not underneath that umbrella of Black history, but I wanted them to learn their community. I wanted them to get to know the books and the people of the library. So it became a third space. So that's when the researching really started kicking in for me, that I needed to get children and families acclimated to researching the history and understanding the personality of people, places, and things, and their contributions. So coming forth, that was like 5 years that we did that and really built a strong foundation.
What year did that start?
That was 2014.
So you grew that program for about 5 years?
Yes.
And then what kind of traction did you find you were getting?
Oh, it was beautiful. Actually, we had, oh my gosh, we had so many people come out because we worked with not only the children and their family, but we worked with the faith community. We worked with OTC, the early childhood development, because I went back to school during that point for early childhood development. And so it really, folks, they filled the whole room. It was, if it hadn't been for, I have to say, Jim Smits, he's amazing. He and I are really good friends. He is one of the associate, he's one of the associate directors, he's one of the associate directors of the Greene County Library, the libraries. And this was something that we had really talked about beforehand, kids losing their identity, that kind of thing. And so he said yes. He really supported me through the whole thing, and people came out in droves. He was so excited. I was excited. And so we took up the library for the whole day, and so I just knew that there was something there. The most important thing that I remember is that we really made it a setting for relationship building, and we had tables put together long ways for them to eat, to serve and eat together as a community. I'll never forget that we never sat down without us all being together and the young ones serving. And so food at that point was something that everybody knew about and felt comfortable around, and we were, grooming the kids on hospitality and all that during the same time. So I guess that I didn't think about it then about food, but it was a part of the programming. And so then moving forward, when I came to Timmons and I got the job here, of course I was going to take that programming, that meet and greet programming, and bring it here. And the research, rethink and reimagine, kept being a part of who I was. Pandemic hit, and I was like, whoa, what am I going to do now, you know? But before it hit, because I didn't think about this, right before it hit, I was interested in Alberta Ellis. And I went to visit her family, her grandchildren. They're still alive. And I started to know about her. I scanned things, everything. And so she had Alberta's Hotel. And she had also a restaurant in there. And she had a beauty shop. All of these things that you couldn't get in a time of, you know, segregation.
And when did Alberta Ellis live? Like, tell us a little bit about your study of the history of her life.
Oh my goodness.
She was from
She's
this
in the
area, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, she because her family actually pre-statehood came to Springfield. Again, it's part of the research part, right? And I started there because of her daughter. Her daughter, Ora Logan, she wanted to know if anyone knew the history of her family, so she put an article in the newspaper. And this is how we found out that her family went back to pre-statehood. Alberta herself, she lived in the 50s. Her hotel, on the corner of Chestnut and Benton. And it's across the street, like where Jordan Valley Clinic, the dental clinic was. But before it was Jordan Valley Dental Clinic, it was the Negro Community Center. And so she was right across the street from that and catty-corner from Pitts Chapel. So during her lifetime, she was just extraordinary. She was more than a hoteler. That's why I kept doing research on her and finding things about her. But she made it possible, you know, for accommodations to be for everyone. She didn't just make accommodations for folks of color. She was a businesswoman, right? So anybody that wanted to stay there, they could spend their money there. So from her, I kept starting just more digging, and she's part of the Heritage Trail. So then the Hollow community took me by surprise, really did. I did not realize I was going to find so much about the land and food through the Hollow community. And
so can you tell us a little bit about what the Hollow community is?
yeah, so the Hollow community is a community that's closest to the proximity of this park, Silver Springs Park. We're in Timmons Hall, and Timmons Hall was moved about 600 feet from Webster Street down here. Well, where Timmons used to sit, the Hollow community kind of went in between there, kind of went down in the Hollow, and back those streets back is Texas and some other areas around the park. And so from my understanding, it was actually the poorest community, but the more resilient community. They had gardens and outhouses, and from researching and interviewing, I researched a little bit, but then I started to get folks calling in about, you know, being a part of the Hollow community. So that's where I started learning about the gardens, and I started learning about on the way to the park, how they were taking shortcuts in the park, but as they were going, taking shortcuts, they were actually grazing, like getting, you know, fruit from here. They had Fruit Alley, which they would walk through and eat fruit before, you know, on their way to the park. And there was another gentleman that's part of the Hollow community. His name is Abe Clark. They used to cross through his yard to get through. So all of these folks had their families had gardens, and then I learned that a lot of them were raised by their great grandparents. And it was like, wow, shotgun houses. And it was just, the list goes on. But what really I loved about listening to them is they were like, we were allowed to be kids. And then they were talking about the wonderful food that they had eaten and what was being grown. And so that's where I started learning about the Hollow community in proximity to the park, and the resilience and where the people come from. A lot of them come from different areas and settled here, but their hands held the skills of gardening. Their hands held the skill of resilience, and with them sticking together and sharing their food, exchanging food for, for different things. I just thought it was amazing, and I thought, this is the community that I've been looking for. I mean, the resilience, and even though they were not, the richest, as far as outward things, their skill sets, of their grandparents or great grandparents was amazing, and so they know how to do, gardening and composting and making, having an outhouse and all of this, and there was no electricity during that time, and so I felt very fortunate. I just felt very fortunate.
So I really love this because you started with a community-based project, and through the curiosity and stuff that engendered, you kind of followed a mystery path to this Alberta Ellis's door, and then you dug deep into her life and came up with this insight into a community that was here in Springfield that was essentially self-sufficient. So they were growing their own food and fruits, and the people who lived here had brought with them a number of skills that were really valuable. And so even though on paper, in a spreadsheet, they looked like the poorest community in town, in fact, there's reason to believe that there were some pretty good resilient techniques happening so that people were getting additional calories and delicious jams. And things like that. So maybe you can tell us some more stories that you collected about that Hollow community.
Well, I'm just getting started, and it's getting so good. I mean, so now we've been talking about recipes, and we are actually connecting to the Weller Garden, because my mom actually started with the Weller Garden. So a lot of times when I need something fresh, so I would say, hey Mom, can you, bring, because she's part of our history keepers too. I asked her, can she bring different vegetables from the garden? And we've started to make our own lunches for our history keepers, because they're so knowledgeable too. Our history keepers are our elders. That's a part of our storytelling, and they're part of these communities, the Hollow community. So I get firsthand to I think our oldest history keeper is 99 now. And so the youngest probably would be 79, 77.
And these are people who would have grown up here in this Hollow community, right?
They would, some grew up here, some were transplanted with their parents, but for the most part, we're talking to grandchildren. So yes, growing up here.
You also mentioned the Weller Garden, and that's a Springfield community garden, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And so what kinds of food techniques do you see coming out of the Weller Garden?
Well, you know what? Mostly my eye is always geared towards the social mobility, and I see the hospitality, and I see the caring, that community that is resilient because they have each other. So that's where, my eyes, they rest on those kind of things. I didn't really start getting into realizing food and techniques and stuff until I had some aha moments of my own.
Ooh, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I woke up one morning, I don't just clean out of the blue, and I was like, oh, the farmer's market is open today. I'm going to go and make vegetable soup. My great grandmother, I'm going to make her proud. I have no idea where that came from. My great grandmother has been passed for since I was maybe 12, like 12. And so, but I was so excited. I'll never forget that day as long as I live. I got up and I love bags, I have a special bag for my produce. I love bags. So I picked out one and I went and I went on Commercial Street because it's nearest, it's nearest to us. And they just had the most beautiful vegetables. I remember getting these sweet potatoes that were just beautiful, orange, reddish orange. You could smell it. You could just smell the freshness. And I picked three of everything, right? Some peppers, some potatoes, the potatoes I got those little potatoes, I just got like a bunches of those. And then the sweet potatoes, I got three of those, and then the onions, and it seemed like, I got zucchini, tomatoes. And so I can't believe it, I'm salivating right now. And then what was really important to me, and this was my pleasure, was I needed to get watermelon with seeds in them. I cannot deal with watermelons without seeds. And so I asked the lady, and she had a barrel of them, and I bought 3. And so I had everything, and I'm really, I'm purposeful about, when I prepare something. And so I just bought a gallon of spring water, and I prepared my vegetables. I washed them, the outside. I don't peel them. And I chopped them in big portions because I like to see the colors and stuff when it's done. So I had no idea how this was going to turn out, but I was very confident in my soul and my spirit that it was going to be awesome. And so I did 6 to 7 hours on the stove on medium to low heat. And when it was done, it was just the most beautiful thing. You could see, I took pictures. I jarred them. I shared with friends. I put a season packet beside it because I like Yo seasonings. They're on Commercial. And so I like the rubs. So I put the apple rub seasoning on them, just in little bags. And so the flavor, though, was so good. You didn't have to have seasoning, but the seasoning is just a little on the side. It's just, just put a little on the top, to top it off if you want. But all of my friends, they were like, this was so wonderful. I've never thought about sweet potatoes and soup. And this was where you could, if you didn't want to have it like a soup, you can just use it on the side of your meats, and just put salt and pepper and butter or whatever. But I loved it because I don't ever put seasonings inside of things because you'll get dull of the tasting of it. And so this, it stayed fresh and, it was gone. And so I made that soup and I have not stopped making stuff since. And I choose to, I've never been a big person on going out to eat or buying like from the market. My mom has been that type of cook where she's like a scientist in the kitchen, and when you don't have, she knows like this has this ingredient, right? And she puts it together. She did that since I was a kid. And I just loved it. You go in the cabinet, it's like, there's nothing here. What is she going to make? Comes out with homemade biscuits. She comes out with, you know what I mean? Just, it's beautiful. But so I believe that's where I got, my intuition on different things. And she always spiced her food with meat. It wasn't, and to this day, I'm not a big meat eater at all. I could care less, but she spiced it. And I don't like a lot of chunks of meat in things, so so when I want something, I'm like, hey mom, can you make that soup, or can you make that? So, and that's one of my things too. I love soup, so I just, soups and salads, that's the type of person I am. So I just have been creating, and here lately I had a sweet tooth, and I was like, you know what, this stuff is not, I'm not a big sugar person at all. It's just like, so I was like, cut up some apples, put some lemon juice on it in my bag, and it makes it even sweeter, And so I have just ever since been experimenting because of that aha moment. And then I had, we're experiencing the holidays, and I never even thought about it. And how my great grandmother would sit on a stool. I remember her skinning a coon. And I was young. And I remember all of these different things. And I remember tomato plants. Like, everybody had a tomato plant. I never even think about that. And then I started realizing gardens. Gardens were always there, but I just never even thought about it. When I was told to go get some potatoes, I'd dig them out the ground, but I didn't think about that. Things didn't start coming back to me until I had like that aha moment about going to the garden. And I really haven't looked back since, and I'm excited about it because I feel that with the Weller Garden and with, folks that are, Miley is amazing. I mean, we're connecting and we're doing things. Because with my programming, I have thought about researching about interviews from elders. I thought about, hospitality, coming together, relationship building. And it wasn't until recently, after the aha moment, that I said, I've been missing land. I've been missing the food. And the Hollow community showed me those skill sets utilized, to build families and survival. And I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm getting chills right now. I was like, oh my gosh, that is the missing component, self-sufficiency. And I was like, it's not that that's a foreign word to me, but when you can feed your family,
it's very powerful.
Yes.
Right? And so many people these days are talking about the ancestors and their relationships with the ancestors. And I love this, that you're finding a way to kind of root those relationships into the ground and think about the ways that food unite communities.
Yes.
And the stories that people tell. And also those moments where people gather around food and share.
Yes.
You had mentioned your great grandmother, and maybe you could tell me a little bit about her and her life.
She is fabulous. It's like she had two farms actually, and I remember her having inherited a second farm, but I remember most of all is that her gait. She was never like, she was in a hurry to get anywhere. She was such an assured woman, she didn't speak a lot, she just, when she had something to say, but she took care of business. And I remember her pantry full, like when they sold the farms and she was in her apartment. I remember nothing stopped. She's the one that took me to the farmer market. The farmer's market was always a part of every Saturday. She looked through her produce, and then she would look on, I'll never forget this. She'd go and she's looking, she's just, very unassuming. And then she looks at the farmer and say, now go get the good stuff.
This was mom's mom or dad's mom?
No, this is my dad's mom, yes. Or my dad's great-grandmother. Because let's see how we are. No, it's grandmother, then it's great-grandmother. So this was my dad's mother's mother. So, and I call her Big Mom. We all call her Big Mom. And so she just had a way about her. She was such a lady, such a lady. But I remember too, she had her money, her big money was pinned to her bra in a corn purse, right? And it's like there was nothing that happened to you that Big Mom couldn't solve. She just was a level-headed person, and she still ran her life like she was on the farm because everything would be done, everything be prepared for, the whole entire week. You know, food, just holidays were amazing. And one thing that she did is she made sure all the family came together. And that's how we started our family reunions, was because of Big Mom, because she was getting up in age and we wanted to make sure that everyone knew who she was. And this was all on my father's side of the family, because he used to tell me stories, because she was a midwife as well, and he would walk behind her with her bag, with her doctor's bag. And so she was just really a phenomenal woman. And this is a thing too, she never the farm that she had, and my Aunt Christelle talks about the neighbors, the white neighbors that were next to her, and they paid Big Mom to work on the land to raise crops from her land. They paid her, and she's just very self-sufficient. It's incredible now that I think about it, and it almost brings tears to my eyes, because I'm like, wow, I was always around her. I never was, lost to who she was, but she was really, she was just phenomenal. I mean, when you talk about, homemaker, and she was just the epitome of that, and she loved her husband. Now, one thing I can remember is that my dad, I always saw the love for Big Dad and Big Mom, just in the simple things she did. But if someone raised her feathers, she would go trotting. Like if they try to take advantage of him. He's a quiet man, tall man. She would trot down. My dad said, I could still see her skirt going back and forth. And she's like, hey, this is my husband. You don't disrespect my husband. She's like, you have to answer to me. And I don't know if she had a pistol or what, but I've never seen a pistol. I'm just kidding. But her words just were firm, and she never raised her voice. But if she had something to say and it was pertinent, they got the point. They got it. So I think she utilized too her connection with the community, because she was very sound in community, and they knew she was a good person.
That ties into so much of what you were saying about communities being resilient because they have each other, and so that people get to know each other's personalities.
Certainly.
And can be there and call on one another in times of need. So a lot of that community work is something that I see your work trying to restore in a lot of ways. I know you're interested in, you mentioned it earlier, third spaces. So could you explain what a third space is?
A third space is where you would spend most of your time outside of your home. Because when I think about me being home, that's the first space. Second space would be like work. You have to have that second space. But that third space would be that leisure, something that you really love and want to be a part of.
And so the meet and greets provided that
they
in
did.
A lot of ways, and also gave people this capacity to tell stories and also learn stories. And I wonder if you think that is an example of applied reparative history.
I think so, because I'm really big on reparative history, and you have to get the story right. There's been, when I say reparative history, I see reparative history in the way of reputation, because a lot of times, well, the majority of the time, whether or not a person has done something good and they happen to be a person of color, there is some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Backlash. I remember seeing an article in the paper, in the Springfield paper, during the research, and the community, the Black community had come together to raise money for the first Negro Community Center I had mentioned earlier. And a cartoonist back then, it shares that they're raising money and that they're, diligently making this happen, but it showed pictures, monkey-like features, and it really, so it's like it doesn't matter your good that you're doing when the reputation is put on, and so we have to have really good conversations around reparative history and stories that are coming from those who lived them, because our young people, they pick up on all of that. And today, everything is on the body, everything. So if you look different, if you, and people can take these things and distort them. And this is how history becomes something that it's repelling, because that's what's grounded, that's what's rooted in your mind, is these bad reputation, and these things are made to separate you, keep you apart. And so with repairing, we're going back to these places that were segregated, that were historically segregated, that were places where you couldn't socialize. If you were another race, if you were I'm always thinking, this word has come to me, othered, because people want to be othered when they're not happy with their identity, when they're not happy with who they are. And so I believe that when we create regenerative tourism and programming, then people leave better than when they came. And they start to understand that we need to be in spaces together. We need to build relationships. And food, to me, it brings everybody, because everybody can relate if they have something they put in their mouth and it's amazing, and they can share, this is how my grandmother used to make, oh, well, my grandma used this spice, and I think that shared story around food starts to bring back those endorphins, those happy endorphins, where everything becomes more palatable, because you're like, wow, when I was a little kid, I really liked that too, and it seems like those conversations bring comfort, and then people actually, they begin to ask the hard questions because they feel comfortable then. So this notion of having history, reparative history, you have to have people in proximity of spaces like Timmons Hall and Silver Springs Park, and they understand the restrictions already that were in the past, formerly segregated spaces, right? Mm-hmm. But then when you bring food into the picture, and even putting your hand to the ground and digging up, like, we're gonna have potatoes today, go out there and get some potatoes. I think that that's where commonalities start to happen, and people's guards are let down, and then they'll ask the hard questions. You won't even have to put it out there. And that's what I've found.
I think that's really brilliant, this kind of experiential learning that comes from talking about food and where it comes from and how it connects people through history. And even today,
Exactly, because everything's about travel, and when you go different places, well, there's different fruits that grow better, different, vegetables that grow better in different soils. So when you think about a segregated space, and if you're only allowed, to come to that space, well, you're bringing those skill sets from all the places you've come from. And you're actually becoming a more valuable community because you're starting to strategize on that. So when if you put up a fruit stand, you're going to be the best fruit stand around because you got all of this skill set from these different places. You know when to grow it, where to grow it, how to get it, And so those are the things that made communities like the Hollow community, resilient in being self-sufficient, even though you had those boundaries, And so that's why I think that the space, and when we're talking about this historically segregated space, that what we're missing is we're missing the richness, and we're talking economic stability, even when it comes to bringing more money to our region, because this is what we're missing, And so with this regenerative programming that I'm starting to do, and then my ultimate goal is to have tourism, regenerative tourism.
So that is my next question for you is, since you started working here at the park, what are your plans? How are you planning to grow this really, I think, interesting puzzle that you have going on here?
Well, it's coming together because now I'm thinking the missing link is the food and the land, right? The park itself has got so much, history of people moving and interjecting in and out of it that I thought, if I could harness community coming back together again, what that looks like, and what everyone was bringing to the table, So that starts with their stories. That starts with, how they navigated, being in Springfield and being underneath these different, conditions, but not wallowing in that. But what we're doing is we want to celebrate community in spite of, and how people work together. And the interesting things is that we each do things that we may not realize that helps one another, because whether you smile at a person, right? Smiling instead of frowning, where you think of someone, just like I saw that dress, and that really looked like you, so I wanted to buy that, community building in all those ways. But in the park, think about, family access, equity in the park. Like, I have friends that have family members that are blind. Well, how would you make that experience, something that they could remember? And so I'm thinking about Braille on the trees, because I'm thinking, I'm navigating, and this all goes back to me learning about how the Hollow community was coming to the park. The children were coming to the park, and they cut through this yard, and they go across, Fruit Alley, grab a pear. They're going down, and so I'm thinking, wow, pathfinding, right? So then I'm thinking, in between our stations, we can have things where we can take different folks through. If they're blind, they can feel on the tree, and they can read that Braille. And then we can tell, because they can hear us, yes, but I want them to feel, and then, like, even with the ground, maybe we can dig up some potatoes. I'm thinking about, I want to have bucket gardens, because I want people to be able to take it with them. I want, so things that would make it an equitable park, in other ways too, like we need to have it where the sidewalks are, they're compliant to wheelchairs. There's, so this holistic approach of having an equitable park for all, in accommodations, in I think that that is a part of regenerative tourism. That is a part of reparative history because you just had a park and deal with it. But Springfield was different. The parks were different. This park was rated to be one of, best parks, right? So coming out of different areas, and especially when you think about Springfield, this was a building town, right? So nobody was, picking cotton, this type of thing. You were working together. So there's a lot of histories that when you uncover, you have, folks that have been here for years, have been founders, just like Alberta Hellis's family. They're white Beadles, they're black Beadles, still to this day. And they were working, this was a building town. So the idea to show these stories and have hands-on, opportunity throughout the park, that's my goal. And I feel like those stories are going to regenerize and we'll be able to taste foods from those time periods. We'll be able to think about, I'd like to get some Louisiana peaches in here, because you haven't lived until you taste it from just every piece of the soil, right? And it's a big, it's a big world. It's not just here, but it starts here with us, And so the look and feel of the park, I want to have, kiosks. I want to have where it's mapping and you see where people are coming from and what was the produce from that place. What was, and I see sampling of food, and with help of Miley, she's already, I don't reinvent the wheel. She's already doing things with, food. And so, but we're going to support that storytelling with those types of foods, right? And I mean, to be able to take that home to your family, to be able to, have that as an experience in your home, I believe that's where it starts to change the trajectory of the way that people think and feel about history. Because they're like, well, what are you guys doing tonight? Well, we got this from, the park in Silver Springs, and, they're working with Miley, and they're working with that person, and so the excitement will build. So, and then volunteering has been like, biggest part of my life being, in church, because we're sitting in a formally segregated church, and churches, we still don't worship together today. But, I believe that when it comes to being a part of one of those traditional African American churches, it was all about volunteering, helping your neighbor, community, and you didn't charge for anything, in the church. And so volunteerism, I'm pulling from that. I'm pulling from volunteerism, but I wanted to connect with educational credits. So I'm working on a volunteer day. It'll be park days, cultivating park days in the park itself. So I'm working on a grant as well that will bring it all together. But I think it's just a beautiful picture of food and land being that missing component that's always been with me, but I never thought about it, And so I'm so excited and I'm so pleased because without the Hollow community and my aha moment, the connections just wouldn't have happened. But I do have to say that, like from my earlier days with Jim Smith, the library, it all took someone that had to believe in me and the vision, because that was something that they supported, and the Friends of the Library, they paid for a lot of that. And now I believe Eva Pelkey is the manager, and I started with her. So she's been at the library for 6 years, and I started with her. Yeah, and so the library holds a special place in my heart because I can read about whatever food I want to go to the library and understand how to do things. And they also have seeds and things, food that you can, start growing gardens. And I believe that the last that I heard is you can get it on the bookmobile. You can get seeds and so I mean everybody is into this food thing, right? And so I just love it because now my eyes are open to it, and I'm just thinking about the next recipe and the next recipe.
I love your vision, and I think the whole idea of sharing food is just such a generous, kind of inclusive kind of spirit that comes out of these discussions about food.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see what you come up with, Christine. This is all so exciting.
I'm excited. Well, you know what? I tell you, I have to give honor where it's due, and it was to Big Mama, my dad's side, my mom, because she's a creative scientist in the kitchen, and then you know what, her mother, which I didn't speak a lot about. I think I saved the best for last because
Tell me about your maternal grandmother.
yeah, Grandma Vicky. It was all about teas and breads with her because it was more on the side of how are you feeling inside? Sit down, let's have some tea. And I remember it didn't matter what time of day it was, there was always tea. And my grandma Vicky had made, like she made her bread in the Folger cans, right?
Yes.
So she made this round bread, right? She would cut and make sandwiches. It was just amazing. And then her cakes and cookies and pies all from scratch. She was adamant about, you're not cooking unless you're cooking from scratch. And my mom would tell me stories, about her. And I know that this is why my mom has such a science in the kitchen because my uncles, I have twin uncles. Well, actually, there was like 3 sets of twins. Yeah, and my mom's family, but Ronald and Donald were the youngest set, and my mom told me about everybody having a part in the kitchen, and my mom would make all the sweets, and then my Aunt Janice would make the meats. I can't remember what everybody else would make, but then I know when my grandmother got my youngest uncles in the kitchen, they were to peel the potatoes. And my mom said they would peel them so thick that my grandmother started making potato peel soup because, they would like potatoes this little and all of the potato on the peeling. So things like that. She was just genuinely always concerned about your feelings, who you are, how you're doing today. And she was an amazing seamstress. She was a homemaker. She was just really about how you felt, and I remember that. And everything that she always had something good on the table. It was always something. And I think it's like, I don't want to say magical, it's more than magical. It's just really heartfelt, You know how a person could always go and buy you a gift, but someone that painstakingly makes something for you or cooks something that takes a long time, that's what my grandma Vicky was.
Like they put love right into it.
Right. So I
think
think
it is kind of like magic. I
well,
do think so.
I think that all of that, they're all a part of me, and it's just now coming together, for me. And I'm really conscious about, how people feel. But I know that tea always I love tea so much to this day, right? And the tea that's, the good tea, the different teas that you can buy. But that with, the beauty of Big Mom, and she was so resilient. She just had a way, her gait, I never forget. And then, the Hollow community and their survival And then, of course, my start, which was through Midtown Library. So I don't think you can do much better than to have all of that, you know, in the ingredients of what's about to take place in Silver Springs Park.
Yes. I say bring it. I'm very excited. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today. This has been such a pleasure, and I've learned so much. And if people are listening to this and they want to get in touch with you, where should they look to find you?
Well, I work for the Springfield-Greene County Park Board, so they would go to the email address or the website address. I'm saying the email. I do have an email, so they would go to cpeoples@springfieldmo.gov to get in contact with me directly. They can go to our website, and that's parkboard.org /Timmons Hall. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.